Good afternoon, folks. Tim Tunnicliffe here on the Great Rugger Run. It's day 32 now. Only 3 more days to go after this one. And I'm here at one of my former clubs. That is the magnificent playing surface of Esher Rugby Club out there behind me. We're doing this one indoors today because it's pretty squally out there and we don't want to trouble the audio too much. If we come over here, we'll see here, there's the slogan of the club, Esher Rugby, where tradition meets ambition. And obviously I'm a complete newbie to live broadcasting, but stood over here is a man that's got slightly more experience, Mr. John Inverdale. John, how are you today?
Tim, I'm okay, and good on you. Just 3 days to go. I'm lost in admiration.
It's,
I really am.
Yeah, it's been a long old while.
Which bits of you are really suffering?
It's mostly lower limbs, shins and calves really are the big issues at the moment, but I'm hobbling along, I think it's fair to say.
Hot bath on Saturday night?
Yeah, absolutely.
And a long bottle of whatever.
Yeah, a few beers, I think, first.
Anyway, well, thanks for pitching up here. It's not a great day here today, but you're right, that is a fantastic playing surface. I mean, it's one of the biggest playing pitches in the country. I mean, our dead ball area it's almost the size of some pitches in other places, which I'm not sure that's the greatest maximisation of space. But anyway, no, this has been almost my home for 35 years now, which is a horrifying thought.
Wonderful thought, surely. Oh, quick question then about those in-goal areas. Have the new laws been utilised here in slightly more common times because of how big those in-goals are?
I think, well, no, I've been really interested by the new laws because I kept thinking that, I mean, they are good laws, I think, and I kept thinking they were going to make the game substantially better. I haven't really seen it so much yet, to be honest. I haven't really seen it in any of the games I've seen on the telly either. So I don't know. Maybe some slightly more root and branch changes need to be made. I mean, we had a reset scrum here on Saturday that took 6 minutes.
Wow.
Now that, you see, that to me is slightly more fundamental than one or two of the other things that they've been talking about.
Yeah, quite possibly. Okay, let's talk a little bit about broadcasting. Obviously, the face and voice of rugby union in the UK for a very, very long time. Are there any, when you look back on it, are there any real sort of highlights maybe that stand out, or a couple of times where you're like, oh, that went wrong?
Highlights. I mean, it was just amazing to be at Wembley. I mean, we're going back. I mean, the first commentary I ever did, the only commentary I ever did for the BBC was Scotland against France in 1988, when I missed the first French try scorer completely. I missed the try. Never mind misidentifying the scorer. I just missed the try. So amazingly, I was never asked back. Then you go through the rugby special era. Being at Wembley, I was going to say in '99. When Wales beat England in that amazing game that gave Scotland the last 5 nations. That was a memorable moment. Through the England period of building up to the World Cup in 2003, being out in Australia, but prior to that actually in '95 being in Johannesburg for South Africa against the All Blacks, which was the greatest sporting event I ever attended. And then, through until actually the Six Nations. Oh, that's a cup of coffee which is done.
That's live broadcasting.
Hang on a moment. We'll do this live.
Yeah.
This is just showing that you have to clean things up as soon as you've made a mess. And I can't find a towel anywhere. Hang on a moment. Yes, we can. Here we go. I've got a towel. But even going back to the Six Nations this year, and the last 2 games were just bonkers. Even they were behind closed doors, and the 2 games that took place in Paris. I mean, it was insane, and that was if you like a great way to go out, because here we are, all done. Because those last 2 matches were crazy. They were just unbelievably exciting, and it just shows that, and as Harlequins have shown over the last 9 months or so, if you want to play, if you want to throw the ball around, and it doesn't have to be attritional, this game. It doesn't have to be, defence-centric. If the rewards are there and people are prepared to give it a go, there's no better game than this to watch and to play if you play it in the right way.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I have been a little bit worried about it over the last 18 months or so, at times. Obviously, at other times, it's been amazing and possibly the best spectacle it's ever been.
Yes.
So where do you see it going in the next year or 2?
I mean, I really don't know. I mean, I really do think it's interesting that I think rugby's on the cusp of kind of where cricket was 20 years ago, maybe. You know, the pre-T20, obviously pre the 100. I just wonder. I wonder where rugby is. You know, I don't think the 12s are going to happen. Not in the short term, but in the long term, who knows? You know, what is the future of sevens? Because it's a discernibly different product and a different arm of the game. But it's a much easier game to understand. From an international point of view, it's a much easier way to get countries like Uganda and Kenya towards the top end of the game, etc., etc. I just wish the game had a better, more holistic approach around the world to what the game should be. And I find it very, very dispiriting how selfish elements within the game are. And the game talks all the time about being this wonderful kind of, I hate to use the word fraternity, but how, you know, it's got a great brotherhood and what have you. It does, but actually a lot of the time it doesn't. A lot of the time, the rugby talks a very good game about we, but there are far too many elements within it that actually all they're thinking about is I. And as a consequence of that, the game is not as big and not as good as it could be.
Yeah, a bit fractured as a result.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, let's talk about where we are now. We're at
Yeah.
Esher Rugby Club. When did you first come here? You hinted at it earlier.
86. I just turned up for training, and the first person I met here was a guy called Paul Stevens. I mean, I've been brought up in Bristol, and the first person I met was a guy called Paul Stevens, who said, where you come from then? And I said, you're from Bristol. And he said, yes. And I think if who knows? I mean, who knows? If the first person I met had been totally different, I might have gone somewhere else. But anyway, you know, fate. God, I wish I'd never met Paul Stevens. But yeah, and then, you know, the years go by. Good times, bad times. Good times, some good times on the pitch, some less good times off the field. We had a great few years in the championship. That ship has sailed for the moment, but we're pretty solid at the moment, and you know, we've got decent facilities here. You know, like any club would say to you, you know, minis and juniors are, you know, thriving. I do think we, like a lot of other clubs, are not struggling, but we're having to work very hard to get adult senior male teams out in numbers, and that's a problem that the game as a whole has got. And you know, it's quite. I mean, I think 2 clubs in London have gone under, already this season.
Oh, really? Old Artemians and...
No. I mean, no, 2 junior sides.
Oh, okay.
And because they couldn't get sides out, and I do worry a bit about what we as a sport are doing to try and keep. You know, once people leave higher education, once they get past 21, now what I think the responsibility is with the clubs, mind you. It's not, you can't just put it all on the rugby union or whatever it might be, but the responsibility is with the clubs in a sense. Like, what are you doing? All those guys who maybe have been in your minis and juniors and then go away to college or wherever they might go, do you keep in touch with them? Do you say, you know, if you come back to this area, make sure you come back and play for us? I mean, I know it sounds very simple, and often it isn't, because you need to have somebody who's prepared to do that. But I think that's an area of the game that I think probably clubs are not as good at as they should be. Yeah,
for sure. That's interesting that you say you're struggling here with men's teams as well, because that's something the club's done really well over the years. It's had a lot of teams out consistently.
When I first played here, I think we had 9 when I first came here. But I got a letter. This is absolutely true story. I got a letter. When was this? About 18 months ago, I think it was, out the blue from this lady, saying, did we scatter people's ashes on the first team pitch because her husband had died and she'd like that to happen? And I said, I didn't know. So I had a chat with our secretary and said, do we do that kind of thing? And he said, well, you know, I suppose we do. So anyway, I rang her back and said, yes, we would. And I said, you know, or I didn't ring her back, I emailed her back. I said, out of interest, why do you particularly want your husband's ashes to be scattered here? And she said, because he captained the 15th 15 in the early 1950s and always said that was the happiest time of his life. So she wanted his ashes to be scattered here. And you think, never mind of anything else to go with this, the fact that we were running 15 15s in those days is an indication of how the game has changed.
That is absolutely remarkable. I don't think I've ever heard of that anywhere in the world before.
Well,
that's incredible.
Yeah, I think he used to play Streatham Croydon, you know, in those days. 15 teams across the board.
Yeah, amazing. What a day if you played them back to back.
Yeah.
Probably not enough time.
No.
Right, shall we take a little walk around the clubhouse here?
Yeah.
Maybe you can point out a few interesting bits and pieces as we do.
Lots of plaques around the, as you would find on any other clubhouse, and bits of memorabilia, and there's a poster over here which somebody dug out during lockdown, actually, which was literally stuck in an attic, which is quite fun, which is of Esher representing London in a match against Havre Athletic Club in Le Havre. So it was billed as an international contest between England and France. And the plaque at the bottom, which you can't actually see it, I think, with all the chairs there. But 6,000 people turned up for that game. And that's 1925, that poster. So we're not too far off the centenary of that. And in fact, we're not too far off the centenary of the club, because that's in a couple of years' time. So we've got to stop. We do have to start planning what the hell we're going to do with that. And there's a very young picture of me up there, which we don't need to see.
Well, I mean, you say we don't. You shouldn't have pointed out in that case.
Whatever happened.
Where are we?
Whatever happened to all those dreams and ambitions? Anyway, and this is a listed fireplace. So actually, when we built the new clubhouse, we had to build it around the fireplace. So even though we wanted to actually put the clubhouse somewhere else, we couldn't because of that. So,
is that true? I've always noticed the club. That's what the fireplace when I played here, and I've wondered if there was a story behind it.
That is the story. And then we've got a decent gym down there, decent physio, sponsors lounge. You know, there's nothing. I mean, you know, a club is a club. You know, we're lucky to have facilities like this. You know, a lot of clubs would die for facilities like this, but other clubs would say, yeah, big deal. So, you know, you kind of are what you are. I mean, all these, you know, grounds are, I mean, essentially it's about playing, isn't it? You know, rugby is about playing. And actually, it stopped raining. God, where have those clouds gone?
Yeah,
and,
miraculous.
Actually, it looks sort of like, actually, that pitch looks absolutely sodden at the moment. But, you know, it's a good, well, as we said earlier, it's a really good playing arena. And that grandstand is so far past its sell-by date, it's not true. And if we had any money, it would have long since gone. But now, but if, you know, when I first came here, if you sort of pan round, well, you can see, if you can see in the corner over there, there's one poplar tree left at the far end of that grandstand. When I first came here, there were, I mean, I'm not sure I've counted them, but 150, maybe 150 poplars like that, lined the whole of the plane of the first team pitch. And it was just it was a fantastic, it just gave it a wonderfully intimate, and probably for the opposition quite intimidating atmosphere to play against. And then sadly they all got rotten and we had to chop them all down bit by bit. One of them, you probably can't see on that, but one of them fell down. Well, one of them fell down and made a hole in the roof, which is still there, as you can see. And so as the years have gone by, bit by bit, they've all had to go. So that is the last vestige of what was it, because the landscape it made the whole place look so different. Obviously,
Yeah, I mean, it made it feel like a stadium almost.
Yeah, it was fantastic, but alas, you know, as I say, you know, nature took its toll, and so that is the last one standing, quite literally.
Remarkable.
But,
yeah,
if we want to wander up here, you know, and it's the great debate about clubs these days and facilities. You know, you can go to an awful lot of rugby clubs, and you know, at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, you can be driving around and just see posts and pitches, but nobody playing on them, which in days gone by, I mean, and that's true of football pitches as well. You know, Sunday mornings, you know, you go to an awful lot of multi-sport areas.
I might have to go back a little bit. Oh, yep.
That's
going to have to be it.
You go to Hackney Marshes, you know, the absolute zenith of recreational Sunday morning football. In days gone by, you know, it was just like a sea of humanity. Now it's not like that anymore. You know, now there are pitches that are not being used, and you know, so I mean, I would love 6 pitches to be in operation at 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, but that's not the world we live in now. And so you do have to start thinking about maximisation of space and what would be best to be done with it.
Yeah. So where do you see Esher moving to from here? Because obviously we mentioned being up in the championship earlier, and now just sort of settled a little bit now, it feels anyway. Stabilised maybe.
Yeah.
Is that how you feel? And if so, are you happy there, or
I mean, the economics are a lot easier in National 2 than they were in the Championship, believe you me. I mean, and I think that's another. I mean, I'm on the RFU council these days, and I'm on a group that's looking at the future of the Championship. And it's a big, you know, the Championship doesn't sit alone in isolation from the rest of the game. You know, it's part of it's an integral part of the jigsaw that creates the economics of the sport. And the economics of the game don't really work. I'm not sure they work in the Premiership to a large extent. So at some point, the game's going to have to be honest with itself, I think, and say, I think if you come back to the absolute basics, it's how big a game is this in this country? And if we were honest with the answer, whatever that answer was, then say, right, if that is how big it is, how big could it become? And if there's a finite point to that as well, then say, right, within those confines, how do we make this work economically? Because the one thing you can't do, you can't compare yourself to football. You just can't. And there's a danger that people, will say, oh yeah, but Harlequins had 80,000 at Twickenham for the big game, 6 or 7 or whatever it was. Yeah, but that's not the reality of it. Most people couldn't tell you the result of that game when they left the ground. Most people who were there were doing it because there was nothing else to do on the last week of December, etc., etc. That's not the core element of rugby. Those are one-off special occasions, and the Six Nations is apart from that as well. I think you'd struggle if you asked 100 people walking down Molesey High Street which club Owen Farrell plays for. I would actually genuinely be very interested to know how many of them could tell you. And I think that is kind of the template that the game needs to just be a little bit more honest with itself about where it is in the sporting landscape.
Okay, so head of National League Rugby.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I do think National League Rugby is a fantastic product, but not enough people know about it. And it stretches from Tynedale. You could have walked to Hadrian's Wall from there. To Redruth. You could walk to Land's End from there. And all points in between. I don't think enough people know about it. I don't think the clubs themselves market themselves as well as they ought to. I think that some clubs' facilities should be better, could be better, must be better. But the public at large, it's a real shame. However many it is 9 million watch England-Wales in the Six Nations game. The next weekend, there's 20-odd matches of National League Rugby. And one of those is going to be just down the road from where you live, from where anyone lives. And yet, why does it not translate from, I really enjoyed watching England-Wales, why does it not translate to, I wonder where the nearest club of any consequence is to me, why don't I go and watch them? And that, in a way, is our job. I think it has to be our job to get people to understand what there is out there. And it's a really good day out. You'll get a friendly, safe environment, a good game, hopefully, people who are prepared to be welcoming and hospitable. And it just might add a little bit to your enjoyment of the game, a little bit to your life as well. And how do we bridge that gap? It's obviously not easy, because if it was, people would have done it by now. But that has to be, I think, our main objective, to somehow or other get more people aware of rugby at this level.
And what tactics are you thinking at the moment? What kind of things are being thrown around as options?
Well, you've got to have proper marketing campaigns. Social media is so important for getting things out there and getting people to know. And I think it's also about integrating the minis and juniors with, the adult club, so that everybody who's involved with the minis and juniors says, "Oh, you must come and watch our first team play." It's a collective, holistic kind of thing. I know that sounds terrible marketing jargon, but I think it is. But I think everybody involved in the game has to do a little bit more to try and get more people engaged in it.
Yeah, I agree, because it is a fantastic product. Having played in the National Leagues myself for a number of years, it's just remarkably enjoyable.
Yeah.
Very decent level rugby.
Yeah, it is. And you would love, I would love, I'm sure anybody who watches this who's involved at a National League club, they would love to have 1,500, 2,000 people coming through their door on a Saturday. A, it would transform the finances. B, imagine the buzz. Imagine the vibe that you'd get out of that. I don't think that's an impossible target, but how you get there is very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we'll leave it there. John, is there anything else you'd like to say about Esher, or anything else?
No, I'd like to say good luck for the next 3 days.
Thank you.
And and this is obviously just the warm up for the really big one next year when you're doing the World.
We shall see. We shall see. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming down. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Good man. Thank you. Okay, John Inverdale here at Esher Rugby Club, amidst connectivity issues, but we got there in the end. I am now, I don't know where I'm going to be going actually. I'm going to go and try and find a few other clubs in the locality for the rest of today. Then tomorrow I'm heading up to another former club of mine, Ealing Rugby Club, Ealing Trailfinders. And then, it's the last week. It's the end of a long road, and I'm excited to get to the finish line and, it's going to be fun. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.